Welcome to talks by members of the Survey and Cartography section of the National Speleological Society. These videos are intended to be how-to videos on cave survey software and other programs used by cavers in the exploration and documentation of the world beneath our feet.
Evening, everybody, and thanks to Aaron for his continuing sponsorship of these Thursday night SACS talks. I'm going to go ahead and hit share screen here. And just give you a quick introduction via one of my standard PowerPoints on what round tripping is and why you should be doing it. I touched on this at the end of my talk last week, so we're a little bit of an overlap here. Round tripping between walls in Illustrator goes back and forth using an intermediate format called SVG. And a couple of examples here. In this case, we see some drawn cave maps of a number of caves that a lot of which ended up connecting. So when caves connect, or when you have added loops, or when you have fixed errors or changed entrance fixed coordinates, the position of your cave maps is going to change. So from this slide to the next one, I'll go back and forth here. You can see that some passages moved a little bit and some connected. This illustration at the top, which is from the walls help files, it illustrates round tripping, shows you a before and after loop that has undergone round tripping. Let's just say that it was determined that that was not a very good loop closure, and the shots were checked and one of them corrected. So the cave map is already drawn. You don't want to throw that information away. So with round tripping, you can move or move and morph all the elements of your previously drawn cave map. In the example that we're seeing here, you can see that some of the drawn elements, like the passage walls and those breakdown blocks, they moved to follow the locations of the new survey stations, and they also morphed. They changed shape. Other things, like the cross sections and the ceiling height symbols, they moved, but they didn't morph. They maintained their shape. And you control what your drawn objects do in the round tripping process by utilizing these layers over to the right, which are mandated by walls. And the reason they're mandated is so that walls knows what to do with the elements of your cave map during round tripping. So there's two main layers that you want to put things in. This isn't quite accurate there. Forget that section one, but basically you have a walls layer and a detail layer. In each of those have a sublayer called symbol or shape. If you want things under those two main layers to just move, you put them in a symbols layer. If you want them to move and morph, you put them in a shape layer. Again, my cute drawing that shows why you should be using round tripping is if the line plot, in this case, the skeleton moves, you want the body and the body outline to move with it. One more little graphic here. Walls was upgraded some time ago so that you can, with round tripping, in this example on the right, you can round trip two Illustrator drawings together into one, which is great if you've connected two different caves that are already drawn. I'm going to X out of that real quick and go back to walls. And I'm going to show you how to export a SVG file from walls for round tripping. Last week's talk, one thing I didn't get to was how to print your file for walls. These are almost almost exactly the same process. So I'll show you where those processes diverge here. But I have, in my project tree over here, I have one cave that I want to demonstrate round tripping on, which is called the Kembal Otoch in the Quintana Roo project. And I've already compiled it, so the this screen has come up that shows the line plot, and I am going to, this is the preview map. I'm going to say that I want to enable the label and the mark. And then I will also go to the segments tab to see if the colors are the way I want them. I want a white background. I've got a color selected from our markers and my labels, a line style, and a line color. That's all set. Back in the map tab, I'm going to click on the scale and position button. And this is where you set your scale, either in inches or your proportional scale as in inches or feet. I use, or inches or centimeters. I like to use a scale of 1 to 500. That's what my symbols are designed for, unless I've got a really, really small cave. And then finally, let's see. When I went back between inches and centimeters, it changed my frame size. So just as with printing a map, you want to set your frame size right there. This is where we diverge between printing and SVG. I'm going to take a quick detour back to printing to show you what's going on there. If I wanted to print this map right now, I've already set up the scale, the frame dimensions, and the colors I want to use. I will go over to printer setup and select which printer I wanted to use. And fortunately, I have the luxury of having a 44-inch plotter available. And so at this point, I would select my paper size, maybe D or something like that, and landscape, and hit OK. I could do a preview of a page layout to see if that's going to fit, and it does. But so that's a quickie version of printing right there. But meanwhile, we're going to go back to round tripping. So I've got all the settings, my initial round of settings done. So now I'm going to hit SVG export up here. Export map as SVG. And so this is the first, this map has never been drawn. So this is the first time that an SVG has been exported for this cave. So I don't already have a drawing. So the first time map setup and round tripping. One of the most important things that you want to make sure you do is to click adjustable output. That's going to allow this SVG file to be round trippable. I already set most of my settings in walls before I got to this point, but one thing you do in a set here is your grid interval and your grid subinterval. This is going to give me a primary grid of 100 meters and a grid subdivision of 10, so I'll have 10-meter subdivisions. Again, since I haven't drawn this map yet, I'm not merging any drawing layers yet. So I'm going to hit, actually, let me go back here real quick. I just realized, I think I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that I can show you how to export a profile. So I'm in the SVG export menu dialog box, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And previously, I'm going to drag it over so you can see it. We had a little SVG viewer, which is not working at the moment because I think it's because Adobe quit support for it, but Andy Edwards is talking about making that an SVG preview come up in a web browser because web browsers support SVG. So I don't have that right now, but what I am going to do then is I'm just going to go ahead and open up that file I just created. So I was working in walls and I exported an SVG file. So I need to go and look for the place that that SVG file was created in and sent to. It was under walls, files, Quintana Roo, because I didn't change the default. It saved it in the same folder I was working in. So you need to pay attention to where you sent that folder and that file and go open it. So now I've opened up a file up here called Combal Walls 2D SVG-Z. And as I scroll back, you can see that I made myself an artboard with plenty of room. So that's great. So I'm in Adobe Illustrator and I have opened up an SVG file. There's two things I need to do in the initial setup of this file. First, I need to save it as an Illustrator file because you don't want to start drawing a cave map in Illustrator in SVG. It will mess you up. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go save as and save it as an Adobe Illustrator file. Oops. And you want to find where in your computer you want to save your Illustrator file. And I'm going to get rid of the default SVG name and name it the name I want to name it. I'm going to drag this over, but you'll see that from my other screen, but you can see that when I went to save it, this SVG file as an Illustrator file, it came up with a dialog box. And in this case, I'm going to accept all of those defaults. Okay. Now you can see up here that I have this. I'm working on a file called combalapproach.ai. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to convert the SVG groups to Adobe Illustrator layers. So SVG is not a drawing program. It's just a file format. And when Illustrator read in that SVG file, and I saved that as an Adobe Illustrator file, you can see over here that it looks like I've got this group of layers. And indeed, this is what things are supposed to look like generally, but it's fooling you a little bit because they're not layers that Adobe Illustrator recognizes yet. They're still groups that came in from the SVG file format. So we're going to convert the SVG groups to Adobe Illustrator layers using a script that is included with walls. So I'm going to go over to File, Scripts, and my script should be showing up here, but Illustrator has forgotten where it is, so I have to go look for it. So I'm going to go Other Script, and then I'm going to go to where I know that script lives, which is, it came with the, in my program files, I'm going to go to where the walls files live. And included with walls is this script. It says script over there. Walls 2D groups to layers. And I'm going to run the script. Oh, sorry, I got to select it. So Illustrator is asking me, do I really want to run this script? And I say yes. Now, when I run this, keep an eye on that layers dialog box over to the right, and you're going to see some of those layers change color. It's a little bit subtle in my color scheme, but some of these layers, particularly the legend, walls, detail, and mask, have changed from a dark gray to a light gray background. That means this script only converted the groups to layers for those layers that you want to be working in. As I mentioned earlier, in order to accomplish round tripping, you need to use the layers scheme that is mandated by walls, because these layers go back and forth between Illustrator and walls, or same thing with Compass. I should note here that I'm talking about walls tonight because I'm a walls user, not a Compass user, but Compass uses the same layer structure for round tripping that was established in walls. So you'll see this layer structure that you're seeing over to the right would look just the same as if you had brought your data in from Compass. As I said, I'm not a Compass user. I can't show you how to export from Compass for round tripping, but once you get to Illustrator, it should look pretty much exactly like what we're seeing here. So again, that script has made some of these layers ready to use for us, and it's locked off and not converted the ones that you don't want to work in. Why do you want those locked off? Well, there's important things like the survey layer, which contains the survey baseline. That is your georeferencing. If you did a bunch of drawing in this file and then moved the baseline, you would blow your georeferencing and your chance for round tripping, because Illustrator doesn't know anything about georeferencing. It doesn't know that each of these station locations came in from walls has a known coordinate. Only walls knows about that. So walls controls the round tripping process, and Illustrator's just there to draw in. So now I'm going to finish setting up this file for working in Illustrator. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to bring in my symbol libraries and my brush libraries and my swatch libraries. I have to go find those. And I'm going to do those individually under the Window tab in Illustrator. I'm going to go down to symbol libraries. Unfortunately, Illustrator doesn't remember where my symbol libraries are, so I have to navigate to them each time I do this. And I'm going to go and surf around and find where I keep my symbol library. And so now, drag it back into my window. This is a separate window that came up, and it's all of the symbols that I have made or stolen over the years. And I like some of these, and I don't like other ones. So I'm just going to go through here and say, okay, I'm going to click on each one of these that I like. And if you look in the upper left, you'll see that they're now appearing over in my symbols palette. This just takes 20 seconds or so to grab the ones I want. And I'm done bringing things in from my symbols library, and I'm going to close that. And then I'm going to go to Window and go to Brush Libraries. Again, Illustrator seems to be dumb, doesn't know where it is, doesn't even remember which directory I looked in last time, so I have to navigate back down through and find my brushes. And now I've got my brush library open up over here. Most of these I like, so my brush library is about to be populated as I click on the ones that I like here. Done with brushes. And I'll do the same thing with swatches. Swatch libraries. Go through the whole process from scratch again of navigating to where my brush library is. Swatch library is. In this library here, it's got 6 items in it. If I put my cursor over them, you can see what they are. I'm just going to go ahead and click on all these. Now you see I've got all those swatches in there. So this file is getting close to getting set up. The last thing I want to do is I'm in the habit of creating pencil drafts of the maps I'm working on. In other words, I print out a line plot on paper and make photocopies of the survey notes to the same scale and draw a pencil draft on a light table. That's the rectification process done one way. The other ways you could do it, or you could bring in just the scans of your survey notes and lay those underneath your line plot to trace, which would involve a lot of moving around of those survey notes to account for the fact that you're not perfect at plotting things in the cave. Or you could also morph those sketch notes in a program like Compass's sketch editor or Caveware and bring in morphed survey notes. Finally, another alternative would be is if you were doing digital sketching in TopoDroid, that takes care of the rectification process here. But I do these pencil drafts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer, temporary layer, and I'm going to name it scans. I'm going to drag it below my main layer. And I am going to locate the scans that I've made for this cave. And you could either place them or drag them in. And I'm going to just drag them in from Windows Explorer. And so I just brought in a few scanned images. If you look closely, you'll see that these images have an X through them, a green X. That tells me that right now, Illustrator is treating those as linked rather than embedded. That means that since they're linked, that's going to mean I have a smaller Illustrator file size because it's not embedding these JPEGs in there, these graphics, which is great, unless you happen to like send this file to somebody, and then then Illustrator on the other person's computer wouldn't be able to find these because they're not embedded in the file. If you do want to embed these, you can just go up to this button up here on the left that says embed. I'm going to click that. You'll see those X's go away. And these two raster images are now included in the Illustrator file. I drew these a little bit bigger scale that I'm actually drafting Illustrator file at. So I know that from past experience and my workflow that I need to scale them. And I want them to be at 70% of what they came in at, because I know that's how I work. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply transparency to these so they're not quite so bold. And I'm going to give them 50% transparency because I'm going to be drawing over top of them. And I don't want them to overpower what I'm trying to draw. Finally, these things need to be placed in their proper orientation and rotated. I'm going to take a look at this first one here that has the entrance. And my scanner is not as big as the sheet I was working with. That's why I have two different drawings. And if I look really closely, I can see some lines on there. See that line right there? There's a grid line. And I'm going to, rotate this around until I can see one of those grid lines. Starting to be parallel. There's this one right there. I don't know if you can see that with the screen share, but anyway, I'm rotating my drawing to align with the grid. that was supplied with from walls that I set up, which is again a 10-meter grid. Find one of my grab handles here. Finish getting this drawing rotated pretty close here. That's good enough for my purposes. And finally, I'm going to take the labels off so I can just see my stations. Drag it over about where it needs to go. Find my entrance station, line it up. And this is pretty good here. I would spend another few minutes maybe tweaking the scale slightly since my scanner might have been off a little bit and getting it rotated, but that's good enough. So now I have a scan in here and I can go ahead and do some demo drawing. I'm going to lock off my scans layer real quick. And as I talked about before, you have these two layers that you really want to work in, which are the walls layer and the detail layer. Walls layer refers to passage walls. And there are two sublayers. There's a symbol layer and a shape layer. Same thing under detail, which means floor detail. You want to do all of your passage wall drawing on the walls shape layer. And it takes a little while to get used to working with layers. In other words, being cognizant of which layer you're drawing on. But I want to start drawing some passage walls in the wall shape layer. So I've selected that layer and I am going to click on stroke. And I want to use a 1-point line for my stroke. And it remembered I was messing with swatches earlier. So I want to have a line with no fill. And then I use a mouse to draw. It's no different if you use a tablet to draw with. You can end up with a line like this. Get a couple lines drawn in here real quick. I'm not going to spend too much time making them real pretty. So I've got a line. I'm going to set it to round caps and round corners. Oops, same thing for this one, because that's the way I like it. I've got some passage walls here. Let me move over to drawing some brushes, which I'm going to do in the detail shape layer, because I want those, like this floor ledge here, to move and morph when I do a round trip. So I'm going to go to brushes, and I'm going to select my floor drop brush and draw this floor drop here. And then maybe I'll grab the entrance drip line brush. And let's see if I've got it in the right direction. Remember, some brushes are directional, like these ones are. So I drew it in the wrong direction. How do I fix that? I'm going to click back on it and select it. With the pen tool, I'm going to click on the start node, and it flips for me. Finally, let me just go ahead and draw some flowstone real quick, like this one down here. That works for me. But due to the length of the symbol that I used to create my flowstone brush, for really short flowstones, I don't want to use a brush. I want to use a symbol. That's going to give me a chance to drag in a symbol here. So for symbols, all of these symbols over here, I don't really want those to morph during a round trip. So I'm going to put them on the detail symbol layer so that they only move relative to the new station locations during a round trip. They don't morph. So there I can drag in, I'll drag in a little piece of flowstone that I like there. And rotate it to how I want it, place it where I want it. Maybe, what else do I have here? I draw all my own rocks, so I don't use rocks for, use symbols for rocks, but here maybe I would bring in a flowstone mound to go there. That covers quickly covers the use of my uses of brushes and symbols. Finally, let me show you how I use swatches, which is something I actually don't like to use, but the swatches are there. And if you want to use a swatch, we'll put that in detail shape. And we're going to first start by drawing an outline of an area. I'm going to draw an outline of an area that I want to fill with sand. So I've created an outline, and so I'm going to give it, I've selected fill over here. I'm going to give it a fill of sand, and then I'm going to click an outline and say none. So I've created a fill of sand. The nature of that shape means some of the sand things got cut off. So if I wanted it to look good on zoom, I'd go ahead and adjust my outlines so that I don't split any sand dots. So this shape here could be sand under these swatches, or could be, oops. They could be rocks or whatever. Again, since when I switch to rocks, I get some rocks that are being cut off. So that is the basic workflow of starting to draw a map in Illustrator that was set up with round tripping. So what I would do is I would finish drawing this map and end up deleting the scans when I'm done with them. So now I want to move on to talking about the other direction in round tripping, which is sending a map back from Illustrator to walls to incorporate new survey data. And I'm not going to draw this map tonight, and I don't have any new survey data for it, so I'm going to switch to a different map. This is another cave in Quintana Roo that's about 3 kilometers long. And this map has been drawn a number of times and round tripped a number of times. So this iteration you see here is the last version of the map that I have. However, I'm going to go back to walls here and find that map. Give me a second to find that. That is called this one here. Oops. Anyway, I'm not going to pull these up side by side, but this cave has some new survey over here. So I'm going to round trip to bring in that new survey. There's also, I'm sure, some additional loops have been closed, so things are going to change location a little bit. So I got to start in Illustrator. And so this is the map I have. As you see, all of the layers are still the way they're supposed to be. One commentary on layers is that I know if you've been doing any drawing in Illustrator to date, you probably already have a preference how you set up your layers. And you're probably chafing at the idea that you have to use these mandated layers. You still have the freedom under this walls mandated layer scheme to do sublayers. So you can take any one of these layers, say this wall symbol layer here, which is what I use for my cross sections. If I expand it, it's got just a whole bunch of individual things in it. But I could go create new sublayer. So if I wanted, let's say under detail symbol. Right now, there's just a whole bunch of stuff dumped in that layer. But if I wanted all of my sand or water or whatever to be all in the same layer, I could create a sublayer under these mandated layers and put them all there. So you could still group things the way you want to, but they just have to be under this higher up hierarchy so that Walls knows how to treat them during a round trip. So I have this drawing here, and it is ready to export as an SVG file to make its journey back to Walls. So to do that, I'm going to go save a copy. And the instructions for doing this are in the Walls help files. But who looks at help files? You would rather watch me doing this. So I'm going to go save a copy, not save as. And I'm going to say that I want to save that as an SVG compressed. SVG compressed is what I'm used to using. Almost always works fine. And so it's giving me an option of where I want to save this. And I'm accepting it. I have to remember where it is, though, because I got to go find it here to open it up in Walls. I'm going to say save. And now we have a SVG export dialog box that's come up. And this is a crucial step for your round tripping for this Illustrator file to work correctly. There's some settings here that you have to have correctly, and they're explained in the Walls help files. But the way I remember it is, first off, these the top row of checkboxes here need to be checked. So check this top row, don't check the next row. And then there's two selection boxes up here. And that first one needs to be style, attributes, entity references. And the encoding needs to be ISO 8859-1. Don't ask me what those all mean. I'm just telling you that's what how you need to set this up on the export. You can go back and look at this video later on. But what I advise you to do right now, and I'll talk for a minute so you can do it, is go ahead and make a screen snip of this export dialog box and save it to your computer if you plan on doing round tripping, because you won't remember what I told you. You need something to refer to. So go ahead. I've got my snipping tool down here on my bottom bar, and go ahead and make a screen save of this dialog box. Aaron, I can't see the chat, but if you have a chance to check the chat to see if anybody wants more time to do that, I can hold off. Otherwise, I can proceed.
I think you're good to go.
Okay, so I've got the export options set, and I'm going to hit OK. And it doesn't give me any confirmation about that export, but I believe that it's done it. So now I'm going to leave Illustrator and go back to Walls. So I'm back in the same cave in my project tree over here. You can see that this system that I'm working on, Ruta de los Guerreros, lives in a book. I've expanded it. And it has all of my Walls survey data. Doesn't have any Illustrator drawings in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the SVG I exported from Illustrator into my project tree. I've highlighted the project here in blue. I'm going to go up to New Item. And I don't want it to be a survey file or a survey book. It's actually an Other, because it's an SVG file containing artwork. So I'm going to say Other, and I got to go find it. And if you remember, I created it in Illustrator. Illustrator saved it in the same place my Illustrator file was that I was working on. In this case, it was here. And if I order by date, it's going to show you, it's going to have that file first. So this is the file that I created about 5 minutes ago. I'm going to click on it, say OK. And if you look over to the left over here in the project tree, you're going to see that drawing file appear. So this is great. I'm ready to, I've brought the artwork into Walls, and now I'm ready to round trip again back over to Illustrator so that I can end up with an Adobe Illustrator file with all of my old artwork and the new survey and all of the old artwork in theoretically a new position due to round tripping. So again, I'm going to set this file up just like I did the previous one. I want to show the station labels and the station marks. Oops. I'm going to set the scale and position. I want, again, 1 to 500. I think this has saved my dimensions, view frame dimensions from the last time. Probably right. And then finally, I'll check my colors. I got a white background. I've got station marker colors, labels, line style, and line color, all looking good. So now I'm ready to export an SVG using the SVG dialog box up here. And let's take a look at the options here. Again, I want adjustable output. I have a 100-meter grid with 10-meter grid subdivisions. But most importantly, now I want to merge artwork. So the merge file right there is grayed out because I haven't actually selected that I want to bring in layers, merge layers to include. So I'm going to click these. So now it's automatically gone and found this layer that I've included there in the project tree. If I was merging two separate drawings, two caves, or two parts of the same cave, I would have brought in two SVG files from Illustrator. So one great thing about round tripping is you can be drafting Mammoth Cave and have a dozen different people working on different sections of the cave, and theoretically you can round trip all of those different pieces of artwork together for a final overall map. Because Walls allows you to round trip two Illustrator artworks together, and then you can round trip that resulting one together with another one over and over again, and basically have unlimited drawings brought in, subject to, of course, Illustrator's artboard size. I've round trip files so far up to about 50 kilometers in length of surveyed length. I can only imagine that if you're trying to round trip all whatever 700 kilometers of Mammoth Cave, you might be running into some size limitations. Maybe Aaron can figure in that. But then in any case here, I'm ready to export an SVG over to Walls or over to Illustrator, and I'm bringing in my artwork. So now I'm going to hit OK. Okay, so it's created this SVG file. It also says that it didn't need to do very much adjustment. Sometimes this dialog box will say that it adjusted location of some of your drawing elements, like 2 meters or 3 meters. And it might also tell you that it couldn't find a survey station. Maybe you've deleted a survey station from your data file that's no longer being used. That would show up in this dialog box too. So I'm going to go OK. And then I'm going to go back to Illustrator and see what we found here. I'm going to get rid of that file. I don't think I'm going to save any changes there. And I'm going to go, I'm through with this one too, so I'm going to save it, get it out of the way. Even though I probably don't need that either. So now I'm going to go look for that file that I just created in Walls. So I've got to remember where my Walls files live. And they were the Walls files from my Quintana Roo project. And if I order by date, which I am, it should show up at the top. So it generally looked like it worked pretty good. So now things are getting a little more complicated because this Illustrator file has undergone, it kind of went through the transporter in Star Trek. You know, usually the molecules come out good, but there's maybe you might have a facial tick or something after that. So I'm going to discuss those. But first off, as you can see up here, I'm still working with an SVG file. So I'm going to go save as, and I want to save that as an Illustrator file where things get wonky. So I'm going to go to where I save my Illustrator files. And I'm going to call it, not the one I was just working on, but I'm going to call it June 2020. And save it. Again, when I'm at this point, when I'm saving, I'm just using Illustrator's defaults. Going, okay, so now I have an Illustrator file here. And the next thing I want to do, if you recall, is I want to convert these SVG groups to Adobe Illustrator layers. I'm going to go File, Scripts, Other Script, because it doesn't remember where they live. So now I've got to navigate to my program files, walls. Yes, I want to do the conversion. Now you can see everything's been converted over here. There is one thing is showing up a little differently this time. There's a layer here called symbols that I actually don't need. And it could be I'm not doing this the best way, but what's going on here is those things that are in that symbol layer are some artifacts that it created during the SVG process. I'm going to delete those because I don't want them. Now that layer's gone away. The last little slightly glitchy thing that occurs in round tripping is that I'm going to click on this text box here, and I'll show you a little problem that comes with text. As you see, I keep my text in this legend layer. I turn that legend layer on and off. All my text on the map goes away. And but anyway, this is a paragraph where I've written the names of the surveyors. And now that I've done the round tripping, I've brought in some new survey, probably some other people, maybe Aaron Addison. Or let's say Mike Futrell, because he comes at the end of the sentence here. If I wanted to go edit this sentence here, you can see that the auto centering is not working anymore. And if I hit enter to put him on the next line, it's not working well. The reason, what's going on there is that all this text came in, but I lost the characteristic that this was a paragraph. So what I'm going to do then is really quite quick, because I'm going to go back to my previous file, which was the March 2018 one. I'm going to select all of the text from my previous version, copy it, go to my new version. I'm going to create a temporary sublayer. I'm going to call it temp. And I'm going to paste that text from that layer. For some reason I got my scale bar showing way up over there. But anyway, I'm going to drag this imported text from the last map in, place it right over the old one, close as I feel like messing with getting it. Then I'm going to go to my legend layer and delete everything that came in from the round trip, select everything in this temp layer, drag it down into my legend layer. So now I have that uncorrupted text, if you will, from the previous file. And I can delete this temporary layer. So this map is pretty much ready to go. again, what I would do is I'm going to go up here and create a new layer, and I'm going to name it scans. Drag it down below my main layer, and then I would bring in the scans for this all these new areas here. I'm going to turn off the grid and turn off the labels, and so you can see there's a bunch of areas that have a new survey that need to be brought in. Now I don't have scans of those because I haven't actually drawn those yet, but you can see where they go. You can also see I'm going to have to move a cross section here. As I mentioned earlier, real briefly, I put all my cross sections in the wall symbol layer because it's not used for anything else. Passage walls need to be in something that morphs. So there's nothing in the wall symbol layer, but that, for me, that's a great place to keep these cross sections. And I do group them with all their little associated lines because after a round trip, they often need to be location be tweaked a little bit. Everything here from this round tripping looks pretty good. It told me that it didn't move stuff very much, and that looks to be the case because I'm not seeing any labels that are overrunning the passage or anything like that. These cross sections still have a nice little gap between them, so that looks like that all behaved pretty well there. So that is we've shown all three directions of the round tripping that you do here. One thing I did mention earlier that I wanted to cover was go back to this Kambal Otoch map, which as you recall, this is the map that I set up for the very first time for round tripping. And it's only a plan. Well, what if I want to do a profile? As you may be aware, profiles in walls aren't round trippable like they are with plan views. So basically, in the walls Illustrator round tripping workflow, profiles are going to be treated the same way cross sections are. They're static objects. But if I have a big profile that I've drawn, in this case, I don't on this map, but I'll show you how I do it anyway. I'm going to need to bring in scans just like I did with this plan. And move them around. And I want to have a line plot to put those around over. Maybe I want to leave the line plot in for the final map like I often do with the plan. So I need to bring in a line plot, but I can't export a line plot from walls as an SVG because it was never, walls wasn't intended to round trip profiles. So I'm going to bring in a profile line plot instead as a Windows meta file. I'm going to go back to this cave, which was called Kambal Otoch. And I always draw my plan views north up. But for a profile, here's the entrance right here. I probably want to have it looking in this direction. So I'm going to go ahead and do some rotations while I'm in the plan view and decide, okay, I want a 45-degree view for my profile. So now I'm going to switch to profile view in walls. Whenever I do that, it doesn't retain the scale, so I'm going to need to put that back in. Oops, 1 to 500. And I need to set the view frame again. I'm going to say let's say 60 by 25 is my view frame, or my border, if you will. Go OK. Check and see all my colors are right still. And I do want label and mark. So now I'm ready to export a profile line plot as a meta file. I do that under File, Export, Map as Meta file. So Windows meta file, it's not the most elegant format, but it does work. So I'm going to, and I got to remember, pay attention to where it's sending it. It's sending in the subdirectory under Quintana Roo in Walls, where Walls keeps its work files. So it's on Quintana Roo again. I'm going to go, OK. So I successfully created a Windows meta file from Walls. Now I'm going to go back to my Illustrator drawing. I'm going to figure out where I want to put this profile. I'll put it under the wall symbol layer. Now I'm going to go in Illustrator. It's not going to be under import, it's going to be under place. So now I need to find where that Windows meta file was saved, which was back with my walls file. And it was under Quintana Roo. Quintana Roo again. And if I go by date modified, there it is right there, just created a while ago. So now it's brought in this, this file here. And sometimes in this workflow, the Windows meta file comes in at the right scale, but here I can see that it's not. So I'm going to go, I believe it's came in at 50%. I'm going to go Object Transform Scale. And type in 200. That probably is about right. It is a scale in there. This grid. No, that doesn't look right either. But anyway, I'll need to figure out the scale, and I can stretch it. Hold down the Alt key so I don't change the aspect ratio. I can rescale this as needed. Sometimes it comes in right with Windows meta file. Sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't take that long to rescale stuff. But a Windows meta file, it's got some stuff in there that I don't need. It's got a solid white background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my Windows meta file off to the side, and I'm going to go Object, Ungroup. I'm going to select that white background because I don't want it. It's got some other stuff on the outside of it here that came in with it that I don't want. It's got some information. It's got some various things I didn't want there. But at any rate, when you've got rid of what you don't want, you can always group it again, Control G, place it wherever you want it. And then when you bring in your scans of from your profile or your survey notes or whatever you want to do, you can place those. So that is how you get a profile plot into your Illustrator drawing in this workflow. I think that's the main topics I wanted to hit on, unless I've forgotten something, which is quite likely. But at this point, Aaron, if you want to let me know if there's any questions, we can go to that.
Yeah, so I don't see anything in chat right now, but I'll just start with a question of my own that is one that comes up pretty commonly, is that the round tripping process seems to work pretty well on primarily or substantially horizontal caves, but what are the challenges or the approaches that someone might use if their cave has more vertical extent?
Yeah, that's a great question. To show you that, let me go back to screen share. And I am going to go to walls and open up a different project. It might take me a minute to find this one here. This project is a multi-level maze cave called the Amazing Maze Cave in Texas. And I've just processed it here. And it's a horizontal maze cave, but it's got several layers. If I went to the profile, it's really got two layers. You could see two levels connected by a couple of vertical passages. And so what I've done is, as Aaron mentioned, go back to Illustrator real quick here. When Walls does round tripping, it relates all drawn elements of your Illustrator file to the nearest survey station in the plan view. If you happen to have an underlying passage with stations crossing this plan view, the round tripping process is not going to know which level is which. It would move this passage wall potentially relative to a station that's located 100 meters below it in a completely different passage. You don't want that to happen. So what I do if I was going to try to do round trip drawings of a multi-level cave is I would break my surveys up into the different levels that I wanted to draw. And so that's what I've done in the case of Amazing Maze Cave. I've got a book here in the Walls tree called Lower Level. And if I hit display, let's see. Get my background color right here. I can, in walls, I can select use own and give that a color. And if I display the map, you could see that the lower level is distinct from the upper level here. So I can process just the lower level. Or I can detach the lower level and I can compile just the upper level. So basically what you could do is you could set up your levels in walls or compass so that you can process them separately, export SVG files separately for those layers, draw your different levels separately, which is something you really kind of want to do anyway for multi-level cave, because you're going to end up pulling those plan sections out, the lower levels or the upper levels out to depict them anyway. So you draw them as separate Illustrator files, and then when you finish drawing them, you just drag the contents of one file back into a composite drawing. So that is in this case of Amazing Maze Cave, there's two pretty distinct levels. They're pretty flat, so it's pretty straightforward to do that. If you're going to do round tripping in Wind Cave or Lechuguilla Cave with 30 different levels that aren't even really levels, it's more like a sponge. If you're trying to do that, you may well be insane.